Welcome in to another episode of my Dynasty Fantasy Football YouTube. Today I'm looking at some Dynasty sells. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Let's get into our first player. So we're going to start off with Jayden Reed. So Reed had a solid rookie year, but it was loaded with touchdowns. In 2023, in 16 games, he had 64 catches, 793 yards, 8 touchdowns on 94 targets, 4 catches and 49.6 yards a game, 13.6 PPR points per game. So he did have a good season. He also added 11 carries for 119 yards and 2 touchdowns. However, there are some reasons where I'm starting to have some concerns about Jayden Reed, even more concerns than before. Number one, he's not getting the 2 wide receiver set snaps. In the 12 personnel, he's not on the field. It's not happening. There's also an overcrowded offense and touchdown regression issues. So let's get into those things one at a time. So once again, Reed is lining up as the slot wide receiver in this offense. He played 66.9% of his snaps in the slot in 2023. In the Packers family night scrimmage, whatever that is, Doubs and Watson outsnapped him. And all throughout camp, those are the 2 outside wide receivers. Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson are outside wide receivers. Now, you might say Christian Watson has injury concerns. Maybe there's something there. The problem is that the Packers also have Dontavian Wicks. So even if Christian Watson gets hurt, Wicks will play on the outside. Reed still will not move out of this slot role that you're seeing right here. Additionally, on top of that, Tucker Kraft is already back and healthy, so he'll easily be ready for week 1, which means that the Packers have Kraft and Musgrave playing at tight end. 12 personnel will be a big part of their offense, which will take the slot receiver, Jayden Reed, off the field. I really hoped that Reed would command a bigger role and maybe get on the field in 2 wide receiver sets at least a little bit, but it almost feels like it's going to be less this year than it was last year in terms of getting on the field in 2 wide receiver sets, because there's not guaranteed to be injuries like there were last year. Additionally, there is no way that Jayden Reed is going to have 10 touchdowns on 75 touches again. No way. That's not going to happen. Reed might have had the touch role of Deebo Samuel, this kind of rushing, short yardage, yak role. But Jayden Reed is not Deebo Samuel. He's not built like Deebo Samuel. He's not the same player as Deebo Samuel. So expecting that he's going to have the touchdown prolificness of Deebo Samuel is unlikely. Now, with that said, how do you move on from Jayden Reed in Dynasty? Well, these are all real trades, a mix of the DLF Trade Finder and the Dynasty Daddy trade database. You could sell Jayden Reed for Keon Coleman. That would be nice. I think Keon Coleman has a lot more upside than Jayden Reed. This one I found hard to believe, but allegedly it's real. Jayden Reed from today, actually. Jayden Reed and Jalen Wright for Brandon Ayuk. I don't think you need me to tell you, if this is on the table, go and do this immediately. And then in a 12-team Superflex, if you can use Jayden Reed in a 25-second to get a 25 first, say in a rebuild, I would absolutely do that. You're getting the much better asset, the much safer asset. And in a rebuild, you really want those 25 firsts. Now, our next sell, Christian McCaffrey. Now, I don't want you to hear what I'm not saying, which is that Christian McCaffrey is still my redraft running back 1. I still like Christian McCaffrey. We don't need to go through all of Christian McCaffrey's statistics for his career. We know that he's a monster. We know that for fantasy. Crazily enough, his 2023 was actually his best season in some ways. He had 272 carries, 1,459 yards, 14 touchdowns, 5.4 yards a carry, and 67 catches, 564 yards, and 7 touchdowns, 24.5 PPR points per game. He had the best yards per carry and most total touchdowns of any year in his career in 2023. So he's not in decline. Unlike other older running backs, Christian McCaffrey is not in decline at all. No other running back had more than 22 PPR points per game over the last 3 years. He's the only one to reach that kind of echelon of scoring Now, you might say, this all sounds great. Why would you recommend selling Christian McCaffrey? Well, this is a calf injury, which I think is still not being talked about that much because Brandon Ayuk is taking up all the oxygen of talking about the 49ers. The valuation is still crazy high. I mean, he's still first round pick in 1 QB startups, which, while I get it, is just not where I am with a 28-year-old running back. And, he's an older running back. Now, we know he currently has a calf injury. It's just a reminder. I'm not saying that it's going to make him miss games, not yet. But it's a reminder that older running backs are one injury away from, let's say I hate to even say it, but let's say Christian McCaffrey had a season-ending injury tomorrow. From that first round valuation, Christian McCaffrey would lose what? 7 rounds of value? Older running backs are one injury away from losing all or a lot of their dynasty value. Just look at Nick Chubb. But Christian McCaffrey is still a league winner when healthy. As I said, though, if he starts missing games, he won't hold his dynasty value, and a lot of running backs miss games. I don't think people are panicking on the calf injury yet, although it does sound kind of serious, honestly. And we know calf injuries have hampered other players like Joe Burrow last year, and then there's other players that calf injuries can linger. Now, here's some real trades that I've seen to trade away Christian McCaffrey. The first one, you could sell Christian McCaffrey in a 25 first for CJ Stroud in a 12-team Superflex. I love Christian McCaffrey, but if I can get CJ Stroud for this kind of price in a Superflex, I would absolutely do it. Another one, you could sell Christian McCaffrey from Malik Neighbors. Malik Neighbors is balling out at camp, but he still has that stink of being on the Giants. Who wants a wide receiver on the Giants? I do think when you see it, week 1, people will say, yes, I want Malik Neighbors. But maybe you can do this now before people really understand. They're still looking at Malik Neighbors' redraft rank and not being as excited. Speaking of the 49ers, could you get Brandon Ayuk and a first for Christian McCaffrey? I don't think it's just enough market-wise to get Brandon Ayuk, but could you add a first? Then you get a younger wide receiver and a first-round pick to cash out on Christian McCaffrey. And then this last one I actually saw, I believe, on Dynasty Daddy as well. I thought it was interesting. You get Michael Pittman, a relatively young wide receiver on a big contract, and Kyron Williams, who was the number 2 running back in PPR scoring last year. You get 2 strong assets in exchange for Christian McCaffrey. Both of them are younger. Maybe this is the kind of deal you'd want to do. But any of the deals I recommended to sell Christian McCaffrey, I would do. If you like my YouTube content, you should sign up for the Patreon. You get my rankings, access to the Discord, and the ability to ask in advance questions for the YouTube videos. Tiers begin at just $6 a month and include all of those things. Also, we're entering redraft and start sit season, which will only be covered on the Patreon. This YouTube channel will remain solely focused on Dynasty Fantasy Football. If you want to know more about the Patreon, check out my Why You Should Join the Patreon video, which is on the channel. It'll explain everything that I'm offering. I really appreciate everyone who signed up and also any new patrons who join. Let's jump into our next player, Marquise Brown. So we know that Marquise Brown has had a mixed career thus far. He had some success in both Baltimore and Arizona, but not consistent anywhere. In 2019, as a rookie, he had 46 catches, 584 yards, 7 touchdowns on 71 targets, 3.3 catches and 41.7 yards a game, 10.5 PPR points per game. Then in 2020, he was a little bit better. 58 catches, 769 yards, 8 touchdowns, 100 targets, but still just 3.6 catches and 48.1 yards a game, 11.4 PPR points a game. Then in 2021, he broke out. 91 catches, 1,008 yards, 6 touchdowns on 146 targets, 5.7 catches and 63 yards a game, 14.1 PPR points per game. Then in 2022, he was traded to the Cardinals. He had 67 catches, 709 yards, 3 touchdowns, 107 targets, 5.6 catches, and 59.1 yards a game, 13 PPR points per game. And then in 2023, 51 catches, 574 yards, 4 touchdowns, 101 targets, 3.6 catches, and 41 yards a game, 9.6 PPR points per game. Some injuries, quarterback troubles kind of derailed last season. Now, why do I have Marquise Brown as a dynasty sell? It's a make or break season for his dynasty value. It looks like the Rashee Rice suspension is going to be pushed to 2025, and he's just on a 1-year prove-it deal. 2 NFL teams have already gotten rid of Marquise Brown. He's 27 years old. So this is it. If he does not deliver this year, his dynasty value will be in severe decline. In 2023, his advanced stats were not so good. 1.27 yards per route run, 67th among wide receivers, 37% route win rate. He's not winning on his routes. 121st among wide receivers. That's really, really bad. The original idea with liking Marquise Brown was that he'd have an opportunity on his 1-year, $7 million contract, which has incentives to prove himself on the Chiefs. However, since then, the Chiefs drafted Xavier Worthy in round 1, and the Rashee Rice suspension, while it still might happen, is likely to be in 2025, where Marquise Brown might not even be there. That means Brown's window to earn targets is reduced. And Brown has never really succeeded when going up against high target earners. His best stretches came in 2021, when the Ravens literally had Mark Andrews and Hollywood Brown and no one else. And in 2022, during the 6 games that DeAndre Hopkins served his PED suspension. Outside of those windows, he hasn't really earned targets consistently. And this year, he faces his strongest competition ever between Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy, and Travis Kelce. Now, ideas to get rid of Marquise Brown. Maybe you could just get a 25-2nd and a 25-3rd for Brown. I think that would be a successful move. Deontay Johnson or Christian Kirk, they're like less exciting, but I think they're much more reliable in terms of production. And then this was one I did see on Dynasty Daddy. Brown, 25-2nd and 25-3rd for T. Higgins. I'd love to get T. Higgins for that price. I think T. Higgins is a really great wide receiver. Marquise Brown, not sure he falls into that same category. So this would be my favorite deal that I could do to get rid of Marquise Brown. Now, I always like to cover NFL news on here. So Josh Downs suffered a high ankle sprain in Wednesday's practice. He'll miss 4 to 6 weeks. And we know that high ankle sprains are notoriously brutal for returning to 100%, even after players come back into the lineup. Downs was having a great camp and was the clear wide receiver 2 behind Michael Pittman. So unfortunately, I've moved Downs down 11 spots in my redraft ranks. Basically takes him off my redraft board. You can't take a speculative wide receiver in redraft who won't be 100% until October. In Dynasty, I only moved him down 2 spots. It doesn't crush him. And it's hard to just dismiss a player that had 68 catches, 771 yards, 2 touchdowns on 98 targets as a rookie. But it's tough in Dynasty. It's maybe not really the best offense for him. Now, before this injury, I wasn't bothering with Adonai Mitchell in redraft because he's still battling for wide receiver 3 with Alec Pierce way behind Downs. And unlike what some might say, Mitchell's not a slot wide receiver. He played 86.9% of his college snaps outside. So the Colts don't have a real replacement for Josh Downs. Rookie Anthony Gould is the one who might jump into the slot. But they do have so many tight ends that they're probably going to play far more 12 personnel. That's going to be their replacement for Josh Downs. Therefore, Mitchell is still a redraft fade, and I almost made him my dynasty sell for this video. So for Mitchell, I moved him up 6 spots in redraft, still at wide receiver 69, not very high. In Dynasty, I have him wide receiver 51. I don't hate the long-term upside, but I don't think the odds of hitting it on this team are very high. Now, I'd usually wrap up the video with Patreon questions, but we're already running a little bit long, so I'll cover those on the next video. But for now, if you like the video, make sure to drop a like and leave a comment with your thoughts. As always, the best way to support the channel is to subscribe, and don't forget to hit that notifications bell so you can be notified about all my exciting content as it drops. Of course, if you want my best fantasy football advice, it's available on the Patreon. Dynasty, redraft, start sit, and more. And every sign-up helps support my independent content. But once again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all later.